Thomas Cromwell was a man of humble beginnings who, through sheer intellect and political cunning, rose to become the most powerful man in England, second only to King Henry VIII. He was the king's chief minister, an architect of the English Reformation and the dissolution of the monasteries, a time when England experienced profound religious and political upheaval. But despite his immense power and achievements, Cromwell made many enemies, particularly among the conservative nobility who despised his low birth and his radical reforms. His ultimate downfall came when he arranged a marriage between King Henry and the German princess Anne of Cleves. And when the king found her unattractive and the political alliance unnecessary, he directed his frustration at Cromwell. Cromwell's enemies, led by the Duke of Norfolk, used the king's displeasure to bring down their hated rival. They presented Henry with a series of charges, including heresy and treason, which they claimed Cromwell had committed in order to seize power and wealth. As evidence, they produced forged letters and summoned witnesses who swore they had heard Cromwell spout heretical ideas. Unable to resist the temptation to believe these accusations, Henry ordered Cromwell's arrest on June 10, 1540, during a meeting of the council. Cromwell, who had sent so many to the Tower of London, was now a prisoner there himself. Over the next month, Cromwell's enemies prepared to strike the final blow. They knew that a trial would be a lengthy affair and could easily be turned into a circus by Cromwell's lawyers. Instead, they chose to condemn him by Bill of Attainder, a legislative act that declared him guilty without a hearing. An irony given that Cromwell had often used this same tool against others. With the Bill of Attainder passed, Cromwell was led to the scaffold on Tower Hill to be executed on July 28, 1540. But his journey to the gallows was far from straightforward. In his final days in the Tower, he wrote a series of desperate letters to the king, begging for mercy and forgiveness. He denied the accusations against him and pointed out that if he had committed treason, he had done so for the good of the kingdom. He also reminded Henry of all the things he had done for him, like breaking with the Catholic Church and marrying Anne Boleyn. But his efforts were in vain. Henry was not moved by his pleas, and the execution went ahead. On the scaffold, Cromwell looked every bit the fallen monarch. He was dressed in the traditional black cap that symbolized death, and he stood on a velvet cushion to make him taller. Yet he still managed to exude a sense of dignity as he addressed the crowd. He spoke briefly, denying the charges against him and asking God to have mercy on him. Then he laid his head on the block and awaited his fate. But what happened next was far from the clean and swift execution Cromwell had expected. The executioner was inexperienced and fumbled, striking him with a sword several times before his head was finally severed. This gruesome and prolonged affair was a humiliating end for the man who had been the king's right hand and one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. After his execution, his head was placed on a pike on London Bridge, a grim and final message to anyone who dared to challenge the king's authority. But the details of the fall of one of England's most powerful men were just beginning to emerge. While the Anne of Cleves marriage was a major factor in Cromwell's downfall, his enemies had been plotting against him for years. Led by the Duke of Norfolk, Stephen Gardiner, a staunch Catholic and Bishop of Winchester, had long been suspicious of Cromwell's motives and feared his growing influence over the king. They believed that Cromwell's radical reforms, such as the dissolution of the monasteries, were motivated by his desire for power and wealth, and they were determined to bring him down. They found an unlikely ally in Henry's sister, the Princess Mary, who had been sidelined by her father's decision to break with the Catholic Church. And Mary Anne Boleyn, she saw Cromwell as a threat to her own position and was eager to get rid of him. Gardiner was particularly vicious in his opposition to Cromwell. He believed that Cromwell's religious views were heretical and that he was a threat to the spiritual well-being of England. He spread rumors that Cromwell was a Protestant spy and even accused him of being a heretic. One day he challenged Cromwell to debate the merits of the Catholic Church, confident that he would expose Cromwell's ignorance and win the support of the king. But Cromwell, who was well versed in both Catholic and Protestant theology, easily won the debate, much to Gardiner's humiliation. Despite these setbacks, Gardiner and his allies continued to plot against Cromwell, waiting for their chance to strike. They got their opportunity when Henry became dissatisfied with Cromwell's handling of the marriage. Negotiations with Anne of Cleves. When the king realized that it was not to his liking, he grew angry with Cromwell, whom he held responsible for the fiasco. The Duke of Norfolk and Stephen Gardiner took full advantage of this situation. They approached the king with their accusations of Cromwell's treason and heresy, presenting forged evidence to back up their claims. Henry, already frustrated with Cromwell, was eager to believe them, and he ordered Cromwell's arrest on June 10, 1540. In the weeks leading up to his execution, rumors spread like wildfire through the streets of London, each one adding another layer of intrigue to the story of Cromwell's downfall. People whispered that Cromwell had been charged with nothing less than treason, that he had been plotting to overthrow the king and replace him with a puppet ruler. Others claimed that Cromwell was a spy for the King of France, sent to undermine England's security and prosperity. Still, others spoke of a secret will in which Cromwell had supposedly declared his intention to seize the crown for himself. These rumors were not entirely baseless. Cromwell had certainly been a controversial figure during his rise to power, and he had made powerful enemies along the way. But the truth was that his fall from grace was the result of a combination of factors, including his own hubris, the machinations of his enemies, and the fickle nature of royal favor. As Cromwell sat in his cell in the Tower of London, awaiting his fate, he must have looked back on his incredible journey and wondered how it all went so wrong. Born in Putney, England, Cromwell had been the son of a blacksmith and had little hope of achieving greatness. But he was a bright and ambitious young man, and he soon set his sights on a career in the church. He studied at Cambridge University and became a preacher, but his true calling lay in politics. Cromwell's big break came when he caught the attention of Henry VIII. Impressed by Cromwell's intelligence and ambition, the king appointed him to be his secretary, a position that gave him access to the inner workings of the government. Cromwell quickly proved himself to be an able administrator, and he was soon promoted to the influential role of vice-chamberlain. It wasn't long before he was the most powerful man in England. But Cromwell's rise to power was not without its enemies. Many of the conservative members of the nobility hated his guts, believing that he was a social climber who was using the king to advance his own interests. They were particularly outraged by Cromwell's role in the dissolution of the monasteries, which had seen the closure of hundreds of religious houses and the redistribution of their wealth. But Cromwell was not afraid of making enemies. He was a ruthless and cunning politician who was willing to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. He was particularly skilled at playing the game of royal politics, and he knew how to ingratiate himself with the king by flattering him and supporting his various projects. But Cromwell's greatest strength may have also been his greatest weakness. He was a man of immense ambition, and he was not content with simply maintaining the status quo. He wanted to change the world, and he was willing to take risks to do it. This desire for change is what led him to the fateful decision to arrange the marriage between King Henry and Anne of Cleves, a deal that ultimately resulted in his downfall. So, as Cromwell faced his executioners, he knew that his own ambition had played a major role in his downfall. But he probably never imagined that his own system, the one he had built so carefully, would be used against him in such a brutal and efficient manner. The news of Cromwell's execution sent a shockwave throughout Europe. The continent's elite, who had once courted Cromwell for his influence and power, now struggled to comprehend how such a prominent figure could have fallen so suddenly and violently. For some, it was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the capricious nature of royal favor. For others, it was a testament to the ruthlessness of the new English regime. But for many, it was simply a mystery. How could a man who had seemed so powerful and influential just a few weeks earlier be brought low so quickly and decisively? In the years that followed, rumors and speculation about Cromwell's demise continued to circulate. Some claimed that Henry VIII had been manipulated by his wife, Catherine Parr, who had convinced him that Cromwell was a threat to their relationship. Others argued that Cromwell's enemies had poisoned the king's mind against him, using forged evidence and false accusations. Still, others pointed to Cromwell's own arrogance and paranoia as the cause of his downfall, suggesting that he had made too many enemies and failed to cultivate allies within the court. The truth, as it often does, lay somewhere in between. Cromwell's fall was the result of a perfect storm of factors, including his own missteps, the machinations of his enemies, and the shifting political landscape of Europe. But whatever the true cause of his demise, there's no denying that the execution of Thomas Cromwell was one of the most shocking and dramatic events of the Tudor era, and a grim reminder of the perils of playing the political game. If you enjoyed this video, then check out this video on what happened to Henry VIII's heart after his death, or take a look at this video instead.